Welcome to the Journos on PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Peter Martin, Tam Cowan, Hugh McDonald, and I'm delighted to say Matthew Lindsay joins us to talk all things football. We'll be discussing the Rangers manager Michael Beale. Is he under pressure? There's government proposals to put the boot into travelling fans. We'll discuss the merits of it and whether it's going to get or gain any traction. And we're going to pick our top 5 football upsets down through the years. I'm sure we can all offer one that sticks in our mind. Whether you agree with us or not is open to debate. Don't forget, if you download the PLZ Soccer app, you'll get all the breaking football stories at your fingertips, and hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. There's so much content there and variety for you to enjoy. So, great to have you with us, Matthew. That's usually the seat where you're happy to box. You box with the best of them in there.
We've had the way in. We stared in each other's eyes and ready to go.
The great thing about this is we get to shoot the breeze and talk about issues, the burning issues, and of course in of all weeks, an international week, it always gathers pace, especially in the fallout from an Old Firm game, Matthew, where everybody's now saying, well, Rangers lost it and the manager's under pressure. And I don't know if you sense this, but as well as the written press and broadcast radio and television assessing where he is, there's a real undercurrent of Rangers supporters well unhappy with him.
Very much so. The thing that struck me about the game at Ibrox on Sunday was, I've been, I don't know how many Old Firm games over the years, and was it Old Firm games at Ibrox when Graham Marty was the manager and they were getting absolutely annihilated. I don't think I've ever seen such an angry reaction from Rangers supporters to a result as I did on Sunday. It was tangible, just the anger that they're feeling at the moment about what they're witnessing.
Yeah. Do you think it was compounded, Hugh, because it was so quickly off the back of the PSV game?
Partly that, but I think that PSV didn't help because that was a thumping. But I think it was partly. But I think the thing was expectation. A lot of Rangers supporters will look at the team lines, and the old ones, if they're looking at that Celtic team, well, if we can't beat them now, when are we going to beat them? And I just think the poverty of the performance. I think as the game started, I watched it last night as a 90 minutes, a few days after, just because I knew it'd be coming on here just to kind of talk about it. And there was some kind of inexplicable stuff, the way that every man in his dog will say now, one way to get at Celtic is to stick somebody on McGregor all the time. You're not going to nullify him completely, but that's crucial. And Rangers at times were going on McGregor, and at times weren't. And there seemed to be big spaces in the Rangers team beyond the front. That's going to. And I just think the poverty of the performance against everybody turning up, the Rangers being not a Celtic supporter apart from the Celtic board in the stadium, and the expectation, and then losing the match. Oh my goodness! And then of course the substitution of Roofe proved a real kind of catalyst for the anger as well.
Yeah, a lot of people booing at the end, which you get on this erratic nature of Celtic against Rangers. They were actually talking about Brendan Rodgers being under pressure had he lost that game, but maybe not as quite as much pressure as Michael Beale.
Fans are always going to boo. They're entitled to boo. You would think that Motherwell now can do no wrong, but whilst we were 1-0 down to Kilmarnock the other week, and obviously we ended up winning that game in quite dramatic fashion. There was a lot of noises of discontent coming from the fans at Fir Park, because that's what fans do. Simple as that, And obviously in this day and age, when every bit of action on the park or off is captured on camera, it was quite interesting though to see the amount of fans run about Ibrox, particularly when the team was obviously leaving the pitch. I think when some players may have been offering the wave or all that clapping stuff, I think when you've been pumped, I think fans hate that. And there was a lot of Rangers fans telling them exactly what they thought of them. Then you see the biggie, the sub, when you're getting a substitution booed, that's a pretty big deal as well. But for all it seems as if there's a lot of maybe fans hit the panic button. I think Rangers will stay up.
That's
I know they're miles behind Motherwell just now. I know, I just got a wee gloat in there, but you know, because that's what a time for an international break when you're sitting joint top of the, forget this gold stuff, right? Motherwell joint top in the league, and it's just great. I mean, you know what, to just have 2 weeks with that canny change, and you're looking at it in every newspaper, you're looking at it in every website, everybody's taking wee screen grabs and everything. It's majestic, you know. But watch, I'm just needless to say, when the fixtures start back, so already looked at this, it's second against third when the fixtures start back. Motherwell against St Mirren, I think Celtic have maybe got Dundee, and St Johnstone are playing Rangers, and I'm just waiting to see what will be deemed the biggie, and all the previews and all the radio coverage and all the TV coverage. There's only one game for me, you know, and it's got the added story with Stevie Robinson and still a small posse of ex-Motherwell players coming back. But
let me ease your mind that there's only one game for you, providing you're writing the script for the radio show and nobody else is detailing the running order.
Yeah,
you know the nature of it.
Oh, I know that's how it works. But no, looking at Rangers in the whole, you know, I can look at it for the outside looking in. I'm not a Rangers fan, I'm not a Celtic fan, but as a Motherwell fan looking at the whole picture, all I can take from it is that I thought Rangers were really poor against a patchwork Celtic team, particularly at defence. I would have loved Motherwell to have had the chance to play Celtic before they get their main guys back up against a defence like that. The whole thing that was banged into me, mainly by Rangers fans at the time, about Michael Beale being a tactical genius and he was a real man when Steven Gerrard was there. It would seem that that's not the case anymore, and you know, you do wonder where Rangers go for here. And enough Rangers fans talking about stick or twist. You know, what do they do in the managerial front? Here you've got the international break. Is it going to get any better under Michael Beale? And then there's just as many Rangers fans saying, well, if they did get rid of Michael Beale, they backed him to the hilt. What are they going to do with all the guys that have come in?
Well, that's interesting when you
it's
give me
nuts.
We're
only 4 games in as well. It's crazy. Yeah.
The interesting one is trying to get some kind of thought of what is in John Bennett's mind, and he's a crucial one. There are other people on the board, but I would say probably Bennett and Latham are the two most significant figures on the board. And it's to get an idea of what's in their mind. And you know, some of the papers this morning were saying, you know, Rangers sources, or it's my understanding that Beale will say that there's not pulling the trigger. There's other people saying that no, you know, he's got to go.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the briefings that are coming out at Ibrox at the moment. I think there'll be quite muted briefings at the moment, but I think he's under huge pressure. I think he's on the ledge, and I think the reason I think this is when you've got the fans that much against you, how do you bring it back?
Well, I think what you're saying about John Bennett and George Latham is right, but ultimately it's the fans that decide. And we saw that last season with Van Bronckhorst. He had, I don't know how many players out. He was playing James Sands and Leon King in centre half against Liverpool and Champions League teams, and he still paid the price because the fans weren't happy. So I think it's the supporters that will decide what happens at the end of the day.
And they've made their views pretty vociferously known, haven't they?
See, talking to the supporters, as a football supporter myself who's got my season ticket, pies into the games, a wee nod and a wee well done, I thought, to the Union Bears guys that did the big display before the game. I thought it was cracking. I mean, it's easy. Sometimes these guys can let themselves down, whether it's Union Bears, Green Brigade, the Well Boys. They can be the odd wee thing that happens. You think, oh, naughty boys. But without a lot of these guys, you don't get any atmosphere at the stadium at all. And I thought that display that they did, at the risk of you want to go another 15 rounds with Andrew H. Smith, as we all previously knew him. I mean, he was starting pointing the finger the other day and talking about casual sexism, because it said about my son, taking my son to rather than my daughter might hang me, but I think the whole thing was it was meant to be a traditional thing about ever since I grew up. And whether you like or no, there are more and more women involved in the game and women's teams and women's players, etc., etc. And we all know the rules, but to start picking away at things like that, I thought it was an absolutely magnificent display.
I would never have picked up on that, to be honest with you, Tam. But the ultimate thing is, I'm always thinking to myself, when I saw it, I thought it was absolutely sensational, and then I thought, wow, it must cost them some amount of money to get these things organised. And it wasn't one of those ones where it's just everybody hold up a card.
No.
This looked as if it was like, somebody's got to pull a few ropes before the kid goes up his dad's shoulders. It cost a fair bit of money.
It was pulley operated.
Yeah, but
and they said it was the first time there'd been a pulley operated, wasn't it, generally called tifo?
Yeah.
And certainly in Scottish football. But
the other thing about it, Matt, I mean, it was the best thing at the game for Rangers fans, because the performance was poor. But we're now living in an era where people have got no patience. The 8 managers were sacked last year, and some of them were sacked early on, after 7 games, Jack Ross. So we're in a situation where Michael Beale's come in November after the 1-1 Rangers at St Mirren, where they were turgid. I was there. I could hear from the fans their displeasure at the way they were playing. He's won 27, he's lost 7, and he's drawn 4 since he took over as manager. And of those 7 defeats, the key ones have all been big ones against Celtic. The win that he got against Celtic, was a meaningless fixture.
Yeah, I think some people saw that as a taste of what was to come last season, and this is, okay, the league's won, but this shows that, what Michael Beale's doing is right, and that this shows we're heading in the right direction. And that all went out the window on Sunday. I thought when he brought in Cantwell and Raskin in January, I thought they were both an upgrade on what they had. They both improved the team. And when they were embarking on this massive rebuild in the summer, I thought it'll be more of the same. It'll be more better players. It'll be better quality footballers who will improve the side, and all these players that they had that were just, the sort of Fashion Sakalas and Scott Wrights and these guys that played well for 45 minutes of football every month and then didn't turn up for the rest of the time. I thought that would be consigned to the past. I think a big part of the anger among the Rangers support is that they're just not seeing that quality. They've spent a lot of money, they've brought in a lot of players, and apart from Jack Butland, nobody's showing why they've spent a lot of money bringing them in. Nobody's seeing an improvement at all. And it is early days, and these guys do need time to settle, and maybe some of them will come good. But at the moment, you're just seeing no progress whatsoever.
I wonder, Tam, how guilty we are, in the media, of maybe stoking the fire, or maybe the quality of the media has changed in such a way that we are too easily guided by a phone call here, a line here from somebody saying, by the way, this guy's 6 million, this guy's 2 million, we've spent this, and then all of a sudden you get Michael Beale coming out and saying, oh, wait a minute, we haven't spent that.
No, 9 players for 13 million.
Yeah. And he changed, so suddenly the narrative has changed, because if you listen to the fans before the game, the expectation was Rangers got a chance to absolutely thump them, based obviously on Celtic as well. But prior to that, going into the start of the season, you're looking, we were all saying, this is Beale's team, and they've backed him. He's changing it, and there was a real sense of.
Here's for me, Peter, is where the narrative's changed, because going into the game, the Celtic fans were all saying, apparently, when are we getting this big signing? No a project player, not a guy that we're bringing through and look to sell on. Where's the guy that we've all heard? They go straight into the team, and he maybe does us a turn in Europe. It seemed that that's what everybody was crying out for. There was even some Celtic fans were a wee bit fearful going into this game, particularly new. Defence in particular, what sort of team they were going to put out. But again, a victory in this game between Celtic and Rangers traditionally, it's the be all and end all. So suddenly any other, it would appear, Doubting Thomases as far as Brendan Rodgers went, you've not heard anything for these guys, the same guys that were giving them really major flack after the St Johnstone game, I've not heard, they've all gone quiet in the demands for this big bucks player.
Yeah, but I hate to be a killjoy, but if you are a journalist who can actually not deal with, what I call blinkers on the here and now of one game, his day of reckoning is coming from September to December, because that's why he was brought back.
Yeah.
So his days when people suddenly start to look at him under the microscope are coming fast. And again, I wonder, Hugh, I talked about the standard of journalism there. Matthew will be able to give us an insight into this. Sometimes we can be hoodwinked into a bit of PR spin, but the other aspect of it is you've got to look and you're saying to yourself, the fans are hoodwinked as well, because, all this talk of, and I think Tam makes a great point, Celtic fans were waiting for the big £5, £7, £8 million signing. It never materialised.
Well, it's hugely interesting. I think the most interesting thing that was said post-match by the managers was Beale on the signings. Everything else was rote. Everything else was what you would expect. Rodgers on the braveries players, the mentalities players, Beale on chances, on VAR, etc., etc. That's all rote. You could actually more or less have that in your computer before you go into the press conference. But when he comes out and says, do you know what, it wasn't 13 million and you're miles off that, what you're getting is a board getting thrown under the bus a bit there. Because who's putting out that it was 13 million,
See, on that, I think that's something that you see a lot when managers come under pressure.
Exactly.
So we've had weeks, if not months, of Rangers strengthening, this player coming in, that player coming in for 5 million, for 3 million, for 4 million, whatever. And we've not heard a word about, he didn't cost that much, or we haven't spent that much. I think it's something that you see with managers when they start, when results dry up and they start coming under a bit of pressure. We haven't spent half the money that people have said we had.
The point here, Matthew, is it's a spin, because quite simply, when a manager comes out and says it, he's putting it out there on record. When you get prior to it this kind of, by the way, this is a £6 million player. It's a source. It's only somebody feeding it to a journalist and saying this guy could cost £5-6 million. So suddenly you can't go back and say, by the way, this board lied to me. Do you know what I mean? But when the manager comes out and say, you're going.
Well, his classic thing is about Danilo, right? He's a £6 million player, allegedly, right? If he scores 6 goals in his first 6 games, everybody's saying, what a £6 million player. If he sits on the bench, you go, we've got a £6 million player on the bench. That's the difference.
Yeah.
One of the interesting things about me looking at the transfer window is Celtic's transfer window, because apart from getting the fans were looking for a £7-8 million player, whether it had been Podence or Fraser, which we knew was ridiculous even to contemplate. What they were looking for was a goalie and a left back. They were definitely looking for a goalie and left back. Yeah. Those were priority positions. I know these were priority positions. And what did they not get? They didn't get a goalie and they didn't get a left back. Football's a very simple game. Nobody cares about that now because Celtic won. Yeah. But if you look at, I watched the game last night and you're looking to yourself and you say, they still need a left back. Hart had a good game. But you say, well, he's not. I would say again, he's not a Rodgers goalkeeper with the ball at his feet. He wasn't an Ange goalkeeper. We did all right with him. And the left back position for me at Celtic is glaring.
Yeah, but it goes back to what Tam's saying, Matthew. And this is where you get certain fans for me that split into certain sections. You've got what I call the hard and fast, green and blue enthusiasts who can only see Celtic or Rangers and they'll buy whatever's been sold to them and they won't take any criticism. Then you've got a section of fans who they deal with the here and now, but then you've got another section who are not fooled by spin, who know they're waiting and they're saying, well, wait a minute, you haven't made those signings, you've got 50 million in the bank as per the accounts. You've taken in, you're getting 30 million minimum from the Champions League. You've taken in over 50,000 in season tickets. You've had 25 million for Jota. You've spent less than 19 million and you've re-signed a few players who won the treble but failed miserably in Europe. So, and you brought back a manager on top drawer wages, Matthew, who undoubtedly must have been, the conversation must have been for him, well, you've got to do something in Europe.
Well, we spoke to Brendan about this at Lennoxtown on Friday, and he alluded to the fact that when he came back in, there was a lot of talk of transfer war chests and, you know, him breaking the Scottish signing record and the Celtic transfer record, spending 30 million buying 15 million pound players. And he said that was never the case as a business model at Celtic. He's comfortable with it. So all these signings that they've brought in, these guys, the Holmes and Lagerbielke and the Naroki, guys who are fairly young and fairly inexperienced, but have a huge amount of potential. I think he's fine with that. I think he's he himself is comfortable with that, regardless what anybody's saying.
What do you think of his remit then? What do you think his remit is?
Well, I think his remit is, I think when he's got a full strength squad and when he's got Rio Hatate and when he's got Cameron Carter-Vickers and when he's got his full strength squad available, I think he's got a team that potentially can compete in the Champions League. And I mean, we saw it last season, although, you know, they didn't get through the Europa League and they didn't finish in the top two. They played well in the Champions League. I think the big problem with Celtic is just the injuries they've had. I think his remit is to compete in Europe, to try and get into the knockout rounds of Europe, whether it be in the Champions League or whether it be in the Europa League, and to win everything domestically. Bottom line.
Yeah.
Can I just congratulate everybody, by the way, no mentioning the foul. Great. Have we moved on for that? Aye.
We can touch.
I've watched that a million times and I still can't make up my mind. But I think there comes a point you need to leave the decision with the officials and move on, because as much as the referee didn't give the foul originally, once he had looked at the monitor again, having been instructed by another senior refereeing official, Alan Muir, then the two of them thought, yep, it was a foul, right? And then I thought what was great when Bobby Madden, he didn't have to do it, when he went through it in his social media frame by frame, he spent a great deal of time going through there, and he had his opinion as well. But then the flip side of that, Neil McCann had his opinion on sports scene, and I nearly fell off the armchair.
I'm not having it.
Neil said it was a
Neil
foul.
says that the rules are there, but he doesn't agree with the rules.
So it should have been a strange take.
Aye, so I don't know how that works, but you know what? It's I've never known an incident like that in any football game I recall seeing before, where your mind just ended up playing tricks. You can see it as a foul 1 second and know the next thing, was it? No, it wasn't. It was, wasn't it? Bonkers.
But to kind of play into your hands, if you get a game where Motherwell have a similar situation, the manager comes out and he said, well, I'm not happy with the decision. They might have a referee who's come out and told me exactly why it's been made, but I'm not happy with it.
Aye.
End of story, full stop. That's it. Celtic and Rangers, government inquiry. I'm writing to the SFA. I want a full reply on it. And if you're a wee guy at the SFA, you just write back, it was a foul, thank you, and there you go. But no, we've got to get referees to explain it.
The whole thing about that is public relations, because and it's not just Rangers that have done this. They come out and say, but we're writing to the SFA, and other clubs have done it.
Yeah.
And the reason they do that is because on message boards and on phone calls and everybody said, what are Rangers doing? The board's got to do something. The board are no daft. The board are going to say, we're going to send a letter here. But it's a public relations exercise. Yeah. I used to talk to John Fleming, the referee supervisor, the late and great John Fleming, and he used to say, my Monday morning has no meetings scheduled, nothing. He come in, he pours himself a cup of tea and he waits for the phone to ring.
Yeah.
And now he's watched all the games at the weekend and he's had all the reports, so he knows what he's got to address. He says, so you're getting that all the time, and quite properly. So if people are unhappy with decision, they should go to the referees. But the making it of an exclusive story is just to tell the fans, we are doing something about it, even if we're not really doing anything about it at all.
You're pretty hot on the laws of football.
Glad you finished that sentence.
What did you think? Did you think it was a foul?
Yeah,
free kick?
Yeah, it was definite free kick. I mean, you have to, if you look at I think Bobby Madden's exposition of it.
Well, here's Bobby Madden's first. Here's the first frame on it that Bobby's had a look. You see, the defender is in control. That's Lagerbielke. That's frame 1. Frame 2 is the defender's action is to play the ball with his left foot. And then from there, frame 3 and 4 that we've got here for you to digest is, this is the important part, he says, just as he's not played the ball at this point, and he puts his foot in between defender and ball. It's a foul anywhere else in the pitch. So
I've changed my mind again though.
So no matter what happens, he says, had the attacker played the ball before the contact, fine, but he was never in control or in possession of it. And he says, like most people, he says, you think he's pissed about and he's got caught on the ball. Great language from Bobby. I wish he'd used that when he was the ref. But when you have VAR and all the angles, you can't allow a goal when you have that evidence. Now, in effect, I have to say, I've witnessed somewhere, this year especially and last year, a situation where suddenly a player is in the penalty box and he goes to play, but the other player nips in front of him and kicks his leg and he goes down. It's a penalty. So some people would say, wait a minute, it's the same thing. He's kicked the Rangers player's leg. He's been dallying on the ball. I personally thought, from my point of view, I thought Rangers were harshly treated with it. I didn't think it was. I thought the goal should have stood.
But see, this is just.
But the point is,
this is the problem.
No, but the point is,
I'm thinking things instead of going with the law.
No, absolutely. Listen, by the way, at the end of the day, if a guy at the SFA says that's the laws, then fine. We're not debating that part of it. We're debating the joyous part of it, which is, Neil Lennon played the game and said, that's not a foul when I'm playing. Paul Lambert, same thing. Right, it's not a foul when I'm playing.
When he was playing,
absolutely. No, I'm merely pointing out to you from players' perspective, fans' perspective is I'm waving a red, white and blue flag. I'm waving a green, white and gold, and this is what I think.
Here's what I think is the crucial bit. Because people say, I'll be watching Twitter and all that, and people say, oh, John Hartson didn't think it was a foul, or Neil Lennon didn't think it was a foul. Dermot Gallagher didn't think it was a foul, right? Okay, you see, every single referee that is refereeing at the moment thought it was a foul.
Yeah. Aye.
Two guys who are refereeing at the moment looked at it slowly and said, that's a foul. The referee, the SFA referee committee said, that's a foul. And the interesting thing about it is, not that it was a foul, these guys have been told that that's a foul. They've been pointed out from pre-season. This is, you have to crack down on this.
Can I just say something to you? Nobody is arguing that point. What I'm saying to you as well is there are situations in the last 6 months alone where the referees committee has come out at FIFA and UEFA and in the SFA and said, this is the interpretation of this and here's why the referee came to that decision. 3 months later, they've changed the rules and then said, now we're interpreting it this way. So
you know what, Peter,
that rule is there. We all have to hold our hands up and accept it. However, the joy of football is you're looking at it, he's caught on the ball, they've raced away and scored, and you go, there are many times when a rule has been implemented or interpreted.
Peter,
and
the guys you're talking about tend to be, they're the only guys that ever 100% know the rules. Everybody else in football thinks they know the rules. Managers think they know the rules. They don't. Managers famously, historically, never showed up when invited to the shindig that the referees would have at St Andrews all the time. A good pal of mine who was a former ref back in the 80s, early 90s, he said they used to, they couldn't wait for the start of the season to see who'd be the first to open their mouth about the standard of refereeing, and it was invariably the same guys who blanked the open invite to go up and spend a bit of time in the referee's company. Fans never know the rules better than the match officials. So there you have it. You had Don Robertson. After seeing it on the monitor again, you had Alan Muir, and then when he didn't have to do that and almost put his head in the chopping block as well, you had Bobby Madden coming out. So you think, right, we've just got to say that, yep, it was a foul. End of story.
Now, here's the twist, Matthew. That situation there that developed, and it's been explained to us, and we all accept it because they know the rules. I'm playing devil's advocate here. That, let's see, if it's consistent throughout this season when something happens.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's what we're going to get for weeks now. Everything's going to be getting poured over, and it's going to be but what about, and this happened and that happened. They're going to have to be consistent. We saw it so often last season. The classic one was the Connor Goldson in hands to the face, and then the minute that no penalty was given there, you then got a dozen clips of identical incidents in Scottish football that were penalised.
Michael Smith, Hearts.
So
same one.
Yeah, they need consistency there.
But you know what? Tellingly, Matthew, I think, because of what we're talking about earlier, the Rangers fans' reaction to this, the Rangers fans' take just now on Michael Beale, the Rangers fans' take on the signings that have come in, I don't think as big a deal has been made of that instant than ordinarily would have. I think even the Rangers fans are moving on for it.
Well,
I think we need to look at the bigger picture here. If for instance that, of course, had happened in you imagine, I don't know, a Scottish Cup final, Celtic against Rangers, right? Then that would take you right out of the summer, you know. But as much as
I think it's a great point, because I was surprised that the measured aspect of a lot of Rangers media, a lot of Rangers blogs about this. They'll all say terrible decision, one of the most atrocious decisions ever, and it's always but, and then they go on.
Well, but comes with, Matthew, the fact, and this goes back to your original point before we all obviously discussed that foul, is but they've made signings, it's his team, they were expecting a win, and a comfortable win against Celtic at Ibrox. It didn't materialise. They were thumped by PSV Eindhoven, and they've looked at the players that he's signed, and suddenly a huge groundswell of opinion is he's on a game-by-game. Some are saying, get him out now. Do you think he's on game-by-game?
Yeah. I think you look at the fixtures that they've got after the international break. They're coming back. They're playing St Johnstone away. They've got Real Betis at home. They've got Motherwell at home. I mean, we saw last season, St Johnstone away was the beginning of the end for Giovanni Van Bronckhorst. St Johnstone are starting to show much better form. If they get a draw, you're going into Real Betis, who are a very good La Liga team. I think those three games will be decisive. They'll be telling.
Yeah, Motherwell, Livingston, Aberdeen all at home, and then of course away to Limassol and St Mirren. In fact, as I looked at the whole run, you don't get until the 30th of December the next derby at Celtic Park. So there's a lot of games in there. There's a lot of Europa League games in there. And I just look at it, and you can always tell when it's right under pressure, because suddenly, Tam, out comes as Hugh mentioned there, and now here are the bookies' odds on the next manager. Kevin Muscat favourite. We've got Jesse Marsh in the running there, even Ralph Husenhartel, Bielsa, Potter, Knutsen, Rino Gattuso, you always get an old favourite. Andre Villas-Boas, Sam Allardyce, Chris Wilder, Frank Lampard's 40-1, and then I would presume if we went further, Tam McManus would be 100-1 and worth a wee tenner. But other than that, that's when you know.
Yeah, what else we know what we take out of this is yet again an absolute nonsense that the officials in the SFA and the world are anti-Celtic. I mean, the preposterous stuff for Alan Stubbs last week, which you get fun out on right away, statistically about a penalty that had been awarded to Celtic against Rangers by the referee that Alan Stubbs was claiming had told them, which I'm sure referees, we used to praise the referees of the past, the Willie Youngs and the Stuart Donalds and the Jim McCluskeys as well, because you could talk to these guys, you could have a laugh with these guys. I dare say in the heat of battle there might have been a referee that might have had a joke about that. Well, you'll get nothing when I'm in charge, as if that was a public perception. And everybody used to say, but if you've ever heard these guys doing their after dinner, they play it up. I mean, a guy who I thought was a great referee in his day, and he's a wee absolute rascal when he gets a microphone in his hand, Bobby Tate, right? Bobby Tate was a fine referee, right? But he will joke relentlessly about what he did against when he was ever taking charge of a Celtic or a Rangers game, or when they're playing each other. And the Alan Stubbs thing, I mean, you can understand why it made as many headlines coming like 72 hours before that Rangers Celtic game, but it was a nonsense to suggest that the refereeing fraternity are anti-Celtic. I always go back to the very, very simple point: how sloppy of every match official in Scotland to allow Celtic to get a quadruple treble. Surely they would have had a committee meeting, yes, at the Masonic Hall with their trousers rolled up, humping a goat, you know. Surely they could have got together at one of these meetings and says, guys, this is looking getting close to a quadruple treble. Seen that League Cup tie? Right, we'll do something offside or we'll send somebody off or back. You know, it's complete and utter guff.
And that brings us to our next point. What goes on at these meetings, and has any animal been harmed?
That's it.
I think Jorginho did, talking of that, I don't know if he was any Masonic link, but Jorginho, as Stuart Cosgrove always likes reminding me, Jorginho lost his virginity.
It wasn't Jorginho. It wasn't Jorginho. It was
Garincha. Sorry, Jorginho.
Sorry, Mr. Jorginho's lawyer. Is Mr. Jorginho still alive?
Jorginho, watch that.
Can I just say, we've got a huge following in Brazil, and on behalf of PLZ, I apologise unreservedly.
Garincha, you're absolutely right.
And to Mrs. Garincha.
Absolutely. How we managed to get a goat and Garincha, and I'll never know. But it brings us on to another topic. I mean, listen, we wait to find out. Game by game, just briefly.
Yeah, I agree totally with Matthew says.
Yeah, okay. We'll wait to see how it all pans out for him in the next few months, if he indeed gets that. You can give us your view on it as well. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. A couple of good topics, good things to get our teeth into. And this one absolutely amazes me. It's the new government proposals to put the boot basically into travelling fans. And I think when you think about football supporters over the last couple of years, they certainly have had more than a few legitimate gripes, which obviously we'll have little shoots of stories off this one. But basically, this is government proposals from the Traffic Commissioners for Great Britain, which is a UK governing body which is responsible for licensing and regulation of firms who operate the buses and the coaches. And although we do have an independent commission here that operates certain laws that buses and fans have to be governed by, this one is a UK one, which if it's passed, you know, you can't supersede it by any individual nation's laws. Now, what are they suggesting? Well, it's the creation of a dedicated football officer at each club, which is fans that travel by coach. This person, 48 hours before every game, you have to receive a notification from a private coach operator stating how many supporters' buses have been booked and how many people are going to travel, and the organiser's details. Supporters' buses are not allowed to stop within 10 miles of a stadium without prior agreement.
Well, wait, I think you should get just one at a time.
Let me give you an overview. Stops at pubs on the way, you know, it would have to be agreed, right? And only allowed in premises where alcohol can be bought ancillary to a meal. Buses would have to arrive no earlier than 2 hours before, no later than 1 hour before the start of the game. Picking up or dropping off of passengers at unauthorised locations would not be allowed. And there's a ban on alcohol, flares and similar pyrotechnics on the coaches. So, I suggested it's a real boot at the fans once more.
That's the only bit that makes sense. You should, I think, ban fireworks on buses.
Yes,
right. Unless you've got a particularly good sunroof, right?
Yeah, well, that's fine. But Matt, this is one and a heavy one. First of all, is that going to get anywhere?
I mean, the whole thing is absolutely staggering. It really, you have to read it 3 or 4 times to get your head around it. It's so mental. I mean, we know what Scottish football is like, you know, but if everybody spends 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at each other's throats, the only time they're really united is when a great player dies. You know, they're united in grief, and you know, they put rivalries to one side and you know, offer their condolences. This has completely united everyone in Scottish football. Everyone in Scottish football, everyone in Scotland. I mean, to such an extent that you've got Jeanette Finlay and Rangers in complete agreement about this. So, you know, that doesn't happen every day of the week.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, I don't really, I mean, it is a consultation. It isn't, you know, it isn't a fait accompli. It isn't going to happen. But I would have thought that the UK government, would have been keen to, garner support in Scotland. I don't think this is a big vote winner for them. No. The reaction
right away, Peter. The very start to say the clubs need to then employ somebody at their club to liaise with the fans. So where are they getting the money for that? I'm assuming this person that's employed is going to be paid. So you're telling these clubs who can barely pay the bills at the end of the month, oh, by the way, you've got to take on another employee. The guff about you can only stop the bus if you're having a substantial meal. It's hardly the way that we were all brought up in football, going to away games and that and thinking, I can't wait to go up to Aberdeen. We fancy a substantial meal. I can't wait for a substantial meal.
Can I throw a grenade into the works here, which just takes it away slightly from football into my favourite subject, which is politics. It is proposed by a government completely out of touch with the rest of the UK and who's living on borrowed time. I mean, right now, if this government did not have a statutory amount of time that they had to legislate and govern for, they would be like Michael Beale. They'd be on a month to month. So my worry with these things is sometimes they put a proposal forward, which this one is so draconian it defies belief, but sometimes they put it through in the hope that they get one or two passed. You know what I mean, Matthew? They throw up 5 or 6 outrageous ones, but they really want these two in.
You know what? You'd love to see a potted history of whoever drew up these plans. You'd love to see what their history is in terms of going to football matches, supporters buses they've been on.
They say it's not about football, right? So they said it's going to be all support. So that's bad news for all the fans travelling by bus to the Kabaddi championships in Manchester. So of course it's a football thing. Of course it is. The other thing is, I think it just adds to the complete demonisation of football. And I'm not being over demonisation. Matthew knows because we used to work together and all that. Walking up to a Scottish rugby international compared to walking up to a Scottish football international, you'd think you were going to, it was a different world in terms of policing. If you see it,
So that one law for one for another. It's a class thing.
The tolerance of drunk rugby fans as opposed to drunk football fans. I was at Twickenham once doing a game, and I was away to buy my ticket in the train, to get back into central London. There was a guy, an England fan, urinating on the machine, right? And I turned round to the cop and I went, like, what? And he come on, I was the Spurs, come on, is it? Can you imagine a football fan doing that? He'd have a broken neck with the back of the...
And the other stuff as well, if it's the government then, bonkers, cost of living crisis, and at a time we would all fondly remember as kids, the only thing I've enjoyed about doing the radio for 30 years is getting to the away games to watch Motherwell and jumping the bus, and I was a regular right up to the age of about 22, 2 different supporters buses at Motherwell, and you knew right away, depending on who you were playing, you knew and you looked forward to what pub you were going to stop. Whether it was your own route to Aberdeen, you pulled into Forfar, you knew on the way back what chip shop you were going to go to. And you got a lot of folk, we had a whole discussion one day in the radio with us, and there was a chip shop in Denny, for example. It seemed to be the centre of the universe for Scottish football fans, because wherever you were going, you were coming back from whatever.
Did they do substantial meals?
Every day, you get a special fish rubber, and it's very hearty eating. But the whole thing's bonkers. And then all this crap about 48 hours before. We've already dissed that as football fans when it comes to tickets. This ridiculous situation where you can't go to a game on a whim, even though there are plenty of seats available, a hell of a lot of the games that you can't say, I fancy getting a ticket, because the rules are, your ticket, you must get this by email by 3 p.m. on Friday. And here they're going back to the Thursday. Your plans might change. Anything your pals might say, you fancy going to that game? Oh, Motherwell are playing great. And I'll go to, no, you can't. All the names had to be in for the bus on Thursday. It's outrageous.
I hate to dismiss it out of hand because I don't think it will get any traction whatsoever. Just basically because we're in the death throes of the Tory government. But I think Matthew's right on this. The SFA, the SPFL, the Scottish Women's Premier League, they are all unanimous in their condemnation of these proposals. We don't support these unnecessary and heavy-handed proposals, and we will be making our views clear in the consultation. Again, you only have to look at it. It's steeped in bureaucracy. That is what we've had in the last 13 years. I hate to be really political about it, but that's what we've got.
It's true, but it
nonsense.
goes back to, again, the demonisation. I was talking about this to a mate yesterday about this. He said, see, when COVID came in, the first big thing about COVID was footballers are earning too much money. Remember that? It was all footballers all say, oh, they're still working and we'll go. You go, wait a minute, let's talk about PPE and what we're going to do, we're going to get a vaccination here. And everything is all about slagging football.
It's deflecting away.
Exactly.
It's
deflection.
Yeah, I make a point about this supporters buses proposals. I read something that the reason that they're wanting to introduce these measures is because there's been a rise in disorder at football, and this is seen as a way of helping to crack down on that. And I wrote a series of articles in the Herald last season about the use of pyrotechnics at football, and I spoke to loads of people about the issues surrounding that. And the Scottish Police Federation were unhappy at the powers that they had to tackle the use of pyrotechnics at football matches. So they went and lobbied MSPs at Holyrood to get more powers because they felt they needed more powers to tackle this issue. Legislation was introduced, they got more powers. So when this came out yesterday, I spoke to the Scottish Police Federation. They'd never heard of this. They didn't know anything about it. The guy that I spoke to said, no, there's nothing needed. We're happy with all the safeguards we've got in place. There's rules and regulations and everything's fine. The police don't want this. Scottish police are quite happy with all the safeguards that they have in place. I noticed it was interesting that this is in place in England and Wales. A lot of police in England and Wales just ignore it. They don't enforce it at all.
Yeah.
So, the whole thing.
The
whole thing is meant.
That in itself is all well and good for certain police forces who ignore it. What fans are really worried about is, you have a situation where a lot of fans are kettled from one area towards another area.
The whole game.
The whole game, and I think their civil liberties are slowly but surely being crushed. And if they sometimes cast aside laws and not implement them, that certainly they don't cast aside certain situations where they're doing things which a lot of fans feel are unlawful. They're being mistreated.
That one of constantly standing in a stand, which I've done, because now I go to games of my choice on a Saturday, and you just seeing guys just filming you, just watching a football game and go.
It all boils down to if you treat people like criminals, that old argument. If you treat people like criminals, they'll behave like criminals.
Okay, it's an interesting topic. I don't think it'll gain any traction. I hope it doesn't, and I'm quite happy to see everybody unite against it. And I think, again, I think there are very legitimate arguments on it. It is a class thing, it is a political thing. Sport and politics undoubtedly do mix, and it has serious implications for the enjoyment of fans, especially what I would say is a real working class element who follow football, in contrast to other ones.
I don't drink, as you know, but the lack of drink at a game, for example, and I'd travel abroad, as you know, to watch football, particularly in Germany, and the amount of drink that's taken in a German ground, and it's culturally, you can literally, you can take it from there. They've got hooks that you can stick it in the back of your seat, and have 3 pints. And the whole culture there is that this is part of the experience. And the problems, out with a couple of teams who have got real strong ultras, but the problems in the Bundesliga are minimal.
Yeah, absolutely. But they've also got laws in place that if you have too much drink and you misbehave, you're arrested. Why we can't abide by that, I
there
don't
are
know.
some people saying, well, I wonder if this sort of legislation, proposed legislation, could nudge us towards that, saying that, right, to keep everybody happy, fine, we'll get the bus straight to the ground, but once we get in there, we want to have a fan zone where you can get a drink, we want to be able to get a drink in at the grounds, or blah, blah, blah. But then, what happens in Scottish football? football any time, and it's one of these arguments that will get drink into the game, and it's one of these that comes up every 3 to 5 years, where everybody's talking about it, then bang, something happens. They say, well, we're never going to get drink into football now. Did you see? You know, whether it's missiles, pyrotechnics, whatever.
Okay, just before we finish, guys, I thought, we always like to finish on a high note, well, not necessarily a high note, depending on which team you supported. I was looking at the top 5 football upsets that you can think of down through the years, and there are a fair few, so I'll let you all contribute to it. Matthew, what sticks in your mind is one of them?
Well, I have to have Celtic 1, Inverness Caledonian Thistle 3 in there, the Scottish Cup, 2000, I think it was.
Yeah.
I was there, got a ticket for my birthday, a fantastic occasion. Cali Thistle played Celtic off the park. And I think you've got to have that one in there, do you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's certainly, for me, one of the best who put Super Cali Go Ballistic Celtic are atrocious. Although, having read up on it at the time, and you'll know this, Tam, it actually was a take on a Queen's Park Rangers game as well. QPR are atrocious,
As an old sub-editor, I'll tell you, there's never anything new in life,
But I still think they deserve tremendous credit for it. I don't think...
Not only was it a terrific result, it wasn't a freak result.
Yeah.
Inverness deserved to win. And the other thing about it as well was the result had huge implications.
Yeah.
Huge implications. It changed the whole management structure at Celtic. It led to the players leaving. It's still talked about today. The famous. There actually should be a play about it. That dressing room at half time. I'd love to hear the Duke in the dressing room at half time and everybody. So that's certainly one of the great ones. I mean,
it's not the best ever subs headline. Zip me up before you go takes a lot of beating to be perfectly honest with you. But
I'll still give a shout for my good friend Simon Houston, who you may or may not know. When he was at the Record for years, at the Scottish Sun now, and when there was a story going about that Ewan McGregor, classic Sun story, Ewan McGregor, apparently out of the Hollywood heartthrobs, he purportedly had the biggest tadger. Simon came up with a headline in the office, and they ran with it, and they went with Bobby Wan Kenobi. And I was presenting the press awards that year, and I mind giving him a special mention. I thought I think it was a lifetime achievement award for that.
And there was, hey, we've done well. We've got Garincha and Ewan McGregor.
I think when you're talking about Celtic, all right, Inverness Caledonian Thistle weren't a bad team in back in the day. They had a tasty team. Yeah. But when you talk about was it the Pop Idol team they were called, that Clyde cobbled together and beat Celtic when Strachan was just in the door, Dewey, Roy Keane. I mean, I think it's the headline that makes people think that was one of the ultimate upsets, Clyde was surely bigger.
Berwick Rangers v Rangers in '67 was huge, because people forget that Rangers team went on to play in the European Cup Winners' Cup final that season.
Yeah.
And there's a strong case to be made that they lost a European trophy because they lost to Berwick Rangers. Because what happened after Berwick Rangers is they sacked their strikers, right? Jim Forrest and George McLean. And they played in the European Cup Winners' Cup final with a centre half.
Right.
At number 9.
Right.
And didn't score a goal in 120 minutes. So that was a huge result.
You don't know the reason, Hughie, that one never sits easily with me, is you think back in the day, because you remember the old cliche about guys like Jim Baxter, Jimmy Johnson, who actually, if you were a time-served carpenter at the time, you might actually have earned more than they guys in a week, right? So I'm wondering what the correlation was there, if you like, Rangers and Berwick Rangers, were these guys really financially, they weren't so far ahead.
Well, technically they were so far ahead.
Technically,
Rangers were one of the best teams in Europe.
Yeah.
I mean, Rangers played Bayern Munich for 2 hours and get beat 1-0. Yeah. That's how good Rangers were.
Well, the other thing is, if you're talking about, the difference in earnings, the difference in, technical ability, and even the difference in league positions, Darvel 1, Aberdeen 0 for me
it's a classic one,
is the absolute, because
like Matthew, a ticket at the Celtic Inverness game. My wee pal John Gall, Brownings the bakery, the minute the draw came out, he was good enough to say to me, do you fancy coming down? It was almost like he was wanting to show off the park and all that, and knew it was a big deal for Darvel, and I says, oh aye. And it was only because, by and large, one of my pals, who's now in the west of Scotland, brought up an Aberdeen fan through his dad. It was his 40th birthday, and I thought, I've got 2 tickets for the game, he'd love that. And we were doing it. It's one of just nights that I'll never ever forget as long as I'm at Fatler. It was just completely bonkers, but what a magical night. And you're right, it kind of, at times like this, just because you're looking for an argument, I used to think in terms of the league placings that because you could look at Celtic and Inverness, where were they in the leagues at that time? You could go back, I don't know where they were, Rangers and Berwick Rangers, you could look at Celtic and Clyde, but the one for me, and I saw it with my own eyes, and it was a right boot in the home odds when Albion Rovers knocked Motherwell with the Scottish Cup at that point. And it was a guy, Gary Phillips, who scored a late winner, and it was like shell shock stuff. And to hear Albion Rovers fans chanting at you, we can see you sneaking out. That was the ultimate just sort of, shame. But at that time, because with that great team under Stuart McCall, we were second in the top flight, and Albion Rovers were second bottom in the bottom league. So I always thought you'll never get a bigger gulf than that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think...
And bear in mind as well, though, with golf's the one that never gets mentioned. And I only know about it because of Cosgrove. When, who was it? Was it Kelty Hearts before they were in the league? Or was it, who was it beat St Johnstone?
When they were defending champions.
Was it? They were. It was definitely in the League Cup or the Scottish Cup. But whoever it was, they were definitely non-league, non-senior league at the time.
Yeah.
But again, that's maybe what I talked about earlier. The foul, or was it in the Old Firm game? You keep talking about it because it's Rangers and Celtic. Here we can't even remember St Johnstone getting toughed out by a non-league club.
It's a good point, and to be fair, you're trying. Well, I was going to say to you, you're trying to cover so many different generations. I mean, I hate to say it, but I always think of Ronnie Radford scoring Hereford against Newcastle,
and because that gets into because of those days, the culture of those days, that we all watched the same things at the same time.
Yeah, there's only three channels,
so we all saw that. We all can remember of a certain age the ball coming out the glue park again. And the other one that we all remember, which probably wasn't a huge shock, but it was at the time, was Sunderland versus Leeds in the Jim Montgomery scene.
Yeah, that's right.
Because Leeds were the best team, one of the best teams in Europe, and Sunderland weren't. But that game was always an upset to me. And I think the greatest upset I can think was, I can't remember, it was probably, I think it was either 50 or 54 when England got beat by United States.
Oh yeah, that's another belt. Yeah, and there are a few. North Korea defeating Italy at the World Cup.
That was a good one, Peter.
Was a good one, and I'd written down, obviously, Wimbledon 1, Liverpool 0, Laurie Sanchez with the goal in the FA Cup final.
The World Cup there had a few crackers, didn't it? World Cup, in Qatar, that had,
Morocco's Saudi Arabia beating Argentina.
And if you're talking about scorelines, Germany dismantling Brazil was certainly one that nobody would ever have said, but obviously, they had a really big off day, and Germany and Brazil should have been one of those games where it was maybe going to be tight. But listen, it's all great for debate. I've thoroughly enjoyed the debate. We've gone through quite a few topics, and hopefully you can agree or disagree, and hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel. Don't forget, the story's on the website. Download the app and you'll get all the breaking news as it comes day by day. There are so many great programmes for you, as well as the Journos. We've got the Scottish Women's Football Show. We have, of course, Straight Talk, this one that I think will catch your eye. We've had Aidan McGeady on there, Hugh Dallas, and we delve into entertainment. Sanjeev Kohli takes us through his world of acting, and talks a wee bit about football as well. Really funny, well worth listening to him. So there's more than a few programmes for you to enjoy on our YouTube channel. Great to have Matthew Lindsay with us talking football, Hugh, and of course Tam.
And can I just apologise to Jorginho again.
Yeah.
No, straight face. In case he is listening,
Yeah.
you never know, he might be.
Absolutely.
So my
and
apologies.
to be fair, by the way,
That was Garincha.
quite a lot of you guys have forgotten. Let's spare a thought for the victim, the GOAT. Anyway, on that note, from all of us...
Cristiano Ronaldo.
on that note...
There's an image.
Yeah, thanks for watching.